Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you all for joining us for our webinar, How to Maintain Business Continuity in a Disrupted World. So first, before we get started, on behalf of everyone at Enverus, I just want to say that we hope that you and your family and your friends and your coworkers are all safe and healthy. Our world depends on energy, and the work that you do every single day is critical to keeping our world powered during this pandemic. So thank you so much for your continued hard work. A couple of housekeeping things before we get started. We will have a chance for Q&A at the end of the session. So when you look in the GoToWebinar console, there's a little section there that says questions. You can actually type in any questions that you have as we're going through the presentation, and we will get to those at the end. And we will be emailing out a replay link of this session after the broadcast. Typically, we'll send it out about a day after, so just keep an eye on your email inbox, and you should see that email come through. And with that, I'm going to introduce our speaker, Brandon Chandler. He has 11 years of experience serving the energy industry. He is currently the product manager for the Oil Field Services Suite product here at Enverus. Prior to this role, Brandon held roles as project manager and controller of a midstream service provider, M&M Pipeline Services. He has also consulted for many OFS providers in the areas of information systems and business analytics. He was a co-founder of Phoenix DAS, an OFS-focused software provider offering workflow applications for service companies. Phoenix DAS was acquired in 2014, and after several years of growth and expansion was acquired by OilDex to further their business automation vision in the OFS space. Brandon holds a BBA in Information Systems as well as an MBA from Mississippi State University. With that, Brandon, I will turn it on over to you.
All right. Thank you very much, Susie. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. Today, we're going to discuss the impact of the COVID-19 outbreak on oilfield service companies, as well as the price war that's currently going on and the negative effect that is having on our market. I'll provide steps you should take to lessen the impact of these events on your company, as well as some recommendations that will make your operations more efficient so you're better prepared for the months to come. We're going to talk about how inefficiency affects your cash flow and why cash flow will be more important now than ever. And as Susie said at the end, we're going to have a Q&A, so there'll be plenty of time to answer any questions. With that, let's get started.
Excellent. All right. Got a question here for you, Brandon. So at the beginning of this year, the world's second and third largest oil producers decided to declare a price war. And that's driving down the price of oil. Can you tell us what impact you are seeing on the OFS service providers?
Yeah, so in response to the dramatic drop in prices, operators are quickly reducing their operational budgets. Smaller budgets means less drilling activity, and that means less potential work for many service providers. Some examples I'm hearing are one South Texas operator just stopped all construction activities. They said they will not be resuming that until oil prices return to the $40 to $50 range. Another operator we're familiar with in the Permian, they just requested 20% price cuts from all their service providers. They're also going to be limiting the number of overtime hours they can be billed for. Just in general, across the board, as long as prices remain this low, we can expect to see less rigs working and further pricing pressure on the service providers.
Okay, so in addition to the price war, we're also dealing with the COVID-19 outbreak. You've been talking with a number of OFS suppliers to gain insight on how this is affecting their operators. Can you tell us what you've been hearing in your conversations?
Yes, so currently, the most common impact of the COVID-19 outbreak in the field is that ticket approvers are no longer available to sign or stamp tickets manually. A consultant or a company man that would typically be in a field office or on location, they're not physically there. So in place of that, suppliers are being asked to email field tickets for approval. In some cases, they're being asked to submit them through a electronic field ticket approval portal if the operator's set up to do that. And then in some of those cases, we're seeing operators actually speed up and fast track their rollout of electronic ticket approvals. I've heard a few variations of the email approval workflow. One operator is having their suppliers email the ticket. The company man or consultant will print that out, manually sign or stamp it, scan it back in, email it back to the supplier. Another workflow I'm hearing is that they're emailing the ticket, but they're doing no approval at the ticket level. They're just emailing that as backup, and then they're just invoicing they're entering an invoice into the billing portal, and the invoice is going to be approved. My main concern with either of these methods, because it's so dependent on email, and when we're talking about now emailing billing documents, backup for invoices and such, it can lead to delays and confusion, and it could cause issues with a supplier's billing process. So when we're faced with these types of challenges, it's important that OFS companies react accordingly, right? Now, I've got 3 areas that I recommend OFS companies focus on during this time. That's health and safety for your employees and those around you, cash flow for your business, and then operational efficiency. We're going to dive into those a little more here.
Okay, so let's begin with health and safety. It sounds like the field ticketing is kind of throwing a wrench in everybody kind of staying away, but also not experiencing disruption in their business. Because of this virus, we're being forced to conduct business with less contact and less paper. So what recommendations can you give our audience?
So we've got a list of common practices we're putting together. We've all seen these, and everyone should already be doing these to keep their employees safe. These include things like putting hand sanitizer at every entrance of a building and putting it in the vehicles for your guys, limiting unnecessary travel for the employees. In some cases, office employees have been able to work from home at least some days of the week, and then also rotating shifts out for some positions so there's less exposure. So those are just common across the board things you can do to keep your employees safe. And Susie actually thought it'd be good. I'd like to send this list out that we've started accumulating of common practices, so we'll send that out after the webinar. In addition to that, you'll certainly be using email a lot more in this distanced environment where we're being asked to not come in person to person contact. There's some common practices for email as well. One thing is just utilize folders. You're going to be emailing field tickets and waiting on approvals, which are going to put a delay in your billing process anyway. Make sure you're using folders, staying organized, so that you're not losing tickets or losing track of those approvals. Another good common practice with email is use PDF attachments. We get a lot of feedback from operators and suppliers when sending in field ticket backup or invoice backup, and it's in a format other than PDF. It can be hard for other users to open. It can also create really large files if it's not a PDF, and so sometimes you'll think you emailed, you sent an email out and it didn't go because it was a larger file. So using PDFs when possible. And then finally, using read receipts. Again, we're talking about now not just conversations going across an email, but actually, important billing documents. So you can use read receipts in your emails and make sure that they're being received and opened. And then in addition to that, if you're still having to go out and get a manual signature or a stamp, so that's forcing you to come in contact on a regular basis with your ticket approver, I recommend just going and asking your customer if they'll accept an electronic field ticket approval. I'm always surprised by the number of suppliers that think their customers don't accept them. They either haven't heard about it, maybe the customer hasn't rolled that out in their area yet. But if you'll just go ask, a lot of them will let you begin submitting electronic tickets, and especially in this time, that'll keep your employees from having to come in contact with those approvers just to get them signed. I think recently we looked and there was over 80 operators just on the open ticket approval portal. So it's likely that some of your customers are accepting those, and you can limit exposure that way. One last item here, I know in this industry we don't do a lot of web meetings or video meetings, but all you guys are on webinars right now, and I just encourage you to try to use those. Use apps like Zoom or FaceTime, even if you're just contacting one person. Microsoft Teams. That's going to keep you from having to meet in person. And then little hint here: a lot of people don't know if you're already using Office 365 for your email, you've got access to Microsoft Teams. It won't cost you any extra, so you can begin using that today to have a meeting or to do a phone call as opposed to trying to meet in person.
Those are all really great tips. Thanks for that. So let's talk about cash flow. We all know that cash flow is important to any business. So why is it more important now?
Yeah, it's even more important today because in our current environment, revenue is being threatened. The fact is, we can all expect to see some increased price pressure, whether that's price cuts or people asking for discounts. We're going to see less opportunities to go out and go to work because of these oil prices being so low. So it's crucially important because if cash runs out, you can't pay the bills, you can't run payroll, you can't make debt payments. And that's one thing that can literally just stop your business on a dime. So cash flow is going to be very important right now. An interesting dynamic of cash flow is that your billing terms don't begin until the day you submit the invoice. So if you've given your customer terms of, say, net 60, the clock doesn't begin counting until you submit that invoice to your customer. Expenses, on the other hand, they occur in real time, right? Payroll, that's generally coming out of your bank account every week. Credit card bills, vendor bills, you get a little bit of time. You get up to 30 days there, but still it's coming out faster than you're getting payments in. So you don't receive the payments for the services you provide until weeks and weeks after you submit an invoice to your customer. That's why it's so important to invoice your customer as soon as possible after the work's completed. And I'm gonna dig into that just a little bit because I think it's so important. One way people measure how long it takes to get paid from your customer is DSO, and that stands for Days Sales Outstanding. Okay, and that counts the number of days from when you submit the invoice until you receive payment from your customer. And a lot of people will look at their business and they'll say, okay, well, my DSO is about 60 or 65, 75. It's not bad. It's not bad. I've learned how to manage that. But there's another part in this business called invisible DSO, is what I call it. So that's the time between when you actually provide the product or service and the invoice gets created. And for some people, that can be several days. For some people, it's several weeks. And that whole time period right there costs your business money. Right? If you minimize that DSO, you free up cash, which we just said is going to be extremely important right now. So I would encourage you to think about creative ways to get those invoices created faster. The faster you get them created after you complete that service, the better off your business is going to be from a cash flow standpoint. A recommendation here, it's just a common thing I've seen of increasing your cash flow, is offering an early pay discount, right? Very common across a lot of industries. You provide a percentage discount for your customers paying early. You do this because cash is so important, and you're willing to give up a few percentage points to receive it faster. I know several OFS companies that are actually starting to increase their early pay discount percentage, and I've heard as much as 10%. Right? That's how important getting that cash back in is becoming to people. So how much you give up depends on your specific business, your profit margins, and any debt payments you have to make. But the point is, you can use this tool to drive faster payments. Right? So it may be time to look at your early pay discounts. If you're not already offering them, you may think about offering them, and that's going to start getting cash flowing into your business faster. It's going to help make it through these hard times, especially if you're being asked to provide a price reduction anyway. Right? So it's my opinion that you should always get something of value if you're going to give something up. And in this case, operators are asking you to give up percentages of your revenue through price cuts. So if you turn that into an early pay discount, you're now getting something of value in return. You're getting paid faster. Right? It's just one example, and we're gonna continue to talk about cash flow throughout the presentation here.
So your point about invisible DSO, Brennan's very interesting, and it sounds like that could possibly get longer with the social distancing that we're having to do right now. That's an interesting thing to point out. So our next question here, it sounds like cash flow is a big driver for suppliers to maintain business continuity right now. So what else can our audience do to stay ahead during this time of disruption?
Yeah, so simply getting by or just sitting back and waiting for this to pass is going to get more and more difficult. We don't know how long this is going to last, both the virus and the price war, but you can expect that it's not going to turn around immediately. And the more time passes as weeks go by, just sitting back and hoping it gets better is not a strategy. Okay, and I tell you that because to remain competitive, you're going to need to operate and function more efficiently than you have in the past. If you continue to operate the same way and just hope it gets better, that is not going to be a useful strategy for you. While these challenges continue in the market, you can expect to see decreasing opportunities for work, and that's going to result in having to do more with less. So this is all leading up to talking about efficiency, right? How to be more efficient. You might find yourself with less resources. You will likely find yourself with less disposable cash, and you may find yourself with less overhead support. The only way to keep your business running efficiently, or to keep your business running with less resources, is by being efficient. I would encourage you to look for common repetitive tasks that someone's doing over and over. So as you're walking through your business in the morning and you're looking at what's going on and you're thinking about the way tickets get processed, you're thinking about the way invoices get processed, payments get posted, those kind of things. Start looking for big stacks of paper or big complex Excel sheets that everybody's working in. Start looking for steps in the process that might cause delays of hours or even days sometimes. All of those are clear indicators of an opportunity to be more efficient. If someone's having to filter through a stack of paper, or if they're having to spend hours a day inside of an Excel sheet, that is a clear indicator there's probably a better way to do that, and you should start looking. I'll give you two examples. These are very different examples, but just things I've seen through working with.
Brandon, sounds like we lost you on audio. There you are.
All right. Sorry about that. So the examples I wanted to point out, the first one is very simple. I wanted to show how a simple change can have a big impact. So I know of a particular case where it was something as simple as sending a text message. There was a company that was still using paper field tickets, okay, still antiquated process, writing things on paper, shuffling around, trying to get it back to the office, okay? And that process meant that they had to wait on field tickets to come back to the office, either in a FedEx envelope, or they had to be dropped off by the driver on certain days of the week. So, I mean, you were talking about at least days, but you could be talking about multiple days waiting on the tickets to get back before an invoicing process could start. A very simple change. They had the drivers begin taking a picture of the ticket as soon as the work was done and texting it back to the office. Now that sounds crazy. You're like, okay, take a picture, text it back to the office. What good's that doing me? They were able to cut several days out of that process because now they weren't waiting on that FedEx envelope to get routed around through the mail and then show up in the office. It has a big impact. Now, as soon as the job is over, billing can begin processing that ticket, getting it in created as an invoice, and you just shave 2 or 3 or more days off of your billing process. So that first example was meant to be, overly simple, but it had a big impact. Obviously, there are better ways to do field ticketing than writing them on paper and taking a picture, but you know what? If you're still using paper, that's a perfect example of how you can benefit from a small change. Another example here, it may be that you could benefit from a application like a dispatching app, or an app that captures payroll hours, or an entire field ticketing solution, right? It could be anything. You're going to look around your business and you're going to look for places you could be more efficient. Most people don't think about adding software or purchasing a product to save money, especially not during times like this. The kind of knee-jerk reaction is turn off everything that ain't nailed down, right? But there's times where you could look around your business and say, you know what? If I could just stay a little more organized on my dispatching and I could work more jobs into the day, if I could be a little bit quicker about getting the hours in from the field, maybe I could build more, I could build a little faster. It can actually pay for itself if you pick the right tool and you pick the right problem to solve. So I just wanted to point that out. If you find the right problem to solve, especially if it's related to billing, and it can affect that invisible DSO we just talked about, it will essentially pay for itself. Plus, you get the added benefit of implementing it while you're not wide open busy. It's always easier to implement something when you're not running around trying to tackle 100 jobs. Other opportunities to be efficient in your business can include integrations. If you find yourself entering the same information in 2 or 3 different places, right, it's very time consuming. It's also expensive. It's something that I see people overlooking a lot. So just because, 1 or 2 people in the business, that's kind of their full-time job. They come in and they just enter the same data in 4 or 5 different places. It takes them several days in the week to do that. That's a time-consuming process, and it's expensive to your business. So that's an opportunity to look for an integration, and one of them I'll point out here is like QuickBooks. Most suppliers are on QuickBooks as their accounting system, but they also have to enter tickets and invoices into a billing portal for their customer. You're essentially just entering that same information twice for every single invoice that you do. There's apps out there, there's a lot of them, that will take data from QuickBooks into your customer's billing portal automatically. Those are a no-brainer. They save you tons of time, and you only enter the data once, less room for error. So those are just a few examples for how you can be more efficient. There's others. The key is that you look for the inefficiency and you determine how you're going to solve it. And solving any efficiency right now or inefficiency related to your billing process is going to have a big impact on your cash flow. So listed here are the things I hope you remember from today's webinar. We have 2 major disruptions going on in the market: COVID-19 affecting the way we interact with each other, and a price war driving down the price of oil dramatically. Cash flow is going to become extremely critical during this time. If you're reducing your expenses to align with your revenue, that's good, but you still need to optimize your cash flow because expenses are going to be paid out faster than the revenues coming in. You can also minimize the impact of price cuts and less revenue by looking for and solving inefficiencies. Focus on those that are affecting billing and expenses right now because they will improve your cash flow and can pay for themselves. We're being asked to continue doing business while limiting our personal contact. You can turn this into a positive effect if you look for ways to improve your operational processes so they're not dependent on personal visits. Some solutions are going to be products you buy, and some are just small workflow changes. And last but not least, don't doubt yourself. These disruptions that we're seeing, they will affect your business, and you need to react. Your customers are reacting. We see it everywhere. That means you should also. Budgets are being reduced, less activity, and you may be asked to cut prices. So be ready to combat that. Be ready to get creative and figure out how to save some of that profit for your business. All right, now we'll take any questions you have. Ms. Susie is going to be our moderator for the questions. Ms. Susie, I will hand it back over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Brandon. Again, guys, so if you have any questions, feel free to type them into the GoToWebinar console, and I'll just go ahead and read them out, and Brandon will answer them. Now, you've got a former controller from a midstream services company that also has experience with building technology, which, if you're listening to what Brandon was saying, technology is really the theme about gaining efficiency. So you've got an expert in your field who understands technology. So fire away those questions. Okay, here's a good question for you, Brandon. This audience member says, I supply capital intensive, long lead time items at the wellhead. How should we manage cash flow and customers when the inevitable order cancellations come through due to the dropping rig counts?
Yeah, so I'll answer that in a couple of different ways. First of all, capital intensive, we just talked about the cash crunch that you're probably going to be seeing just because of the other factors in the market. I'm sure you've seen on the news, and we've been getting a lot of good correspondence back from some local attorneys and small business programs. But there's going to be loans available out there for all businesses that are going to help you with the cash crunch. So especially if your business is capital intensive and you got to outlay that cash up front, I'd recommend looking into and applying for those loans to help bridge the gap. Regarding the inevitable cancellations, those are always tough, right? Long lead times. You've been working on this for weeks, maybe months, and a cancellation comes through. Obviously, work with your customer. It's going to be tough on everybody. I always recommend just taking the approach in times like this that we are all in it together, right? Your customer is probably hurting just like you're hurting, and vice versa. Going forward, obviously with capital intensive and long lead time projects both, make sure you're taking deposits, right? Progress billing on those type of things. It's gonna keep you in a safer position than letting you get stretched out by bearing all that risk yourself. So that's something you can talk about with your customer. Say, hey, given the current environment, we don't have the capital to outlay to build this for you without taking a deposit up front, so we'll take a percentage down. So those would be my recommendations there.
Awesome tips, Brandon. This next question, do you know of any oil field specific credit reference organization that reports on current status of various service companies and operators?
Yeah, maybe not credit reference specifically, but Enverus actually has some lists going around that I thought were pretty interesting about we'll call them good, healthy customers versus not so healthy customers. So I would look toward some of those reports. The RS Energy guys put out reports commonly about operators and the health of those operators. So I would look to those industry-specific reports to just gauge health, and you could define that a number of different ways. But I don't know of any that specifically do credit ratings.
So this is a good question. Somebody's referring to the actual price war between Russia and Saudi Arabia, and he says both of their economies are oil dependent, so it doesn't seem like they're both shooting themselves in the foot.
Yeah, there's a lot of different opinions out there. I read one over the weekend that was just highlighting the cost of producing a barrel of oil for both of those countries. The synopsis of what I read and some of the other items I've seen is that Saudi's certainly hurting a lot worse in this scenario than Russia is. Nobody's happy that it's this low, but the thought was that Russia could hold out longer. Like I said, lots of opinions going on there about what the long-term strategy may be on both sides. But yes, I don't think they're doing anybody, including themselves, any good by driving prices this low. It's more of a standoff, right? Who's going to blink first?
Yeah, and guys, I just want to let you know that Enverus is really trying to provide you guys current information on what's going on with the energy market. We're hearing a lot about the pandemic, but us in this market, we also know that there's a major drop in oil prices, which I don't think we're hearing enough about on the news. So if you want a good resource to stay in touch with what's going on with the pandemic and the oil price war, I've actually just put a URL into the chat box for everybody. You can click on this link. It'll take you to our Enverus COVID-19 market page, where we're just posting current news on what's going on with the energy market, and we'll be posting new and helpful content. And there's actually also a couple of links for some on-demand webinars that we actually have our analysts talking about details of this price war and what we're predicting for the future as far as prices and supply and demand, and kind of how long we see this current market condition playing out. So please use that as a resource to keep up with what's going on. Okay, back to our questions for our webinar. How can we limit the number of invoice disputes received by customers?
Yeah, great question. First of all, if you're using a electronic ticket approval or invoice approval portal, that's probably the biggest thing you can do to start in that direction of preventing disputes. And the reason for that is when you're using an electronic portal versus, just getting a stamp or a signature, those portals will actually validate the information you're entering on the ticket. If you think about fields like AFE numbers, PO numbers, cost codes, there's hundreds of codes, right? Easy to get those wrong. Property names, well numbers, easy to misread or miswrite one of those codes and names. So when you're putting that into an electronic portal, it's actually checking to make sure the entry you're putting in is valid. And that will prevent the majority of your disputes based on something like that, like a miscoding or an incorrect property name. Another common reason for disputes may be that you have a pricing agreement in place with your customer. So you have MSA pricing or agreed upon pricing with them. And, maybe it's for a certain region, or maybe it's expired and you didn't know it or they didn't know it. And you end up ultimately, by accident, putting the wrong price on the invoice. Again, those electronic portals, all of them I've seen where you're doing electronic approvals of the invoice or the ticket, they're going to check that for you. As you're entering that price, it's going to tell you, hey, this doesn't match the agreed price. It can auto-populate the agreed price. So that would be my recommendation as a first step, is if you're not doing electronic approvals, try to get there with as many of your customers as you can. Another way to help you get there is automation. And I say that because probably the second most common thing I see is everything on the ticket may be accurate, right? The company man signed off on it, he stamped it, he put his information on it. But again, super easy. If I've got to re-enter all that information into my billing system and into a billing portal for my customer, there's several opportunities for me to make a mistake. Integration and automation will solve that. So if you've got I'm going to give you some examples. There could be a variety of ways to do this, but if you've got a field ticket app and you're doing your field tickets inside that app, when those tickets come into the office, you don't have to re-enter all that information into the billing system. It's just going to create the invoice for you, like in QuickBooks. And along those same lines, if you have the invoice in QuickBooks now, you don't have to re-enter all that information into a billing portal. It's just going to send that information up to the billing portal for you. So those apps are very common. They're out there and available. Anytime you can add a level of automation to a process, or you're taking a process to an electronic form where it was paper before, you're going to reduce errors and reduce disputes.
So this is kind of going back to that concept of invisible DSO. When a service provider submits a field ticket to be signed and returned back, doesn't the wait time have a lot to do with the operator approver or the company man? And what's a good way to minimize that time period where you have to wait?
Yeah, so I'd give you two tips there. One, I'll just reemphasize what I said about the invoices. If you're doing electronic, it can be tracked. So that's something that I always point out. If you're just getting a paper signature, or you go drop something off on somebody's desk or leave it in the doghouse, nobody's tracking how long that's sitting there. Okay. If you send somebody an electronic ticket, there is tracking associated with that, and people get reports about how long it's taken to approve tickets and that kind of thing. The second part of that is more of a social aspect, or communication, just keeping good communication between you and the customer. I've seen that work wonders. People that just send a ticket off and don't ever think about it again, or they know it's been sitting there for 3 or 4 weeks, but you're kind of hesitant to contact somebody. they end up with the longest wait times. If you send a ticket off and it's been sitting there more than a couple of days, I recommend, and I did this when I was in my previous roles, I'd pick up the phone and I'd call somebody. You can start with an email because these people are all busy and working. They're not responsive to email. Pick up the phone and call them. And I had a process, and it was a checklist in place for anybody doing collections or doing AR reports in our business. And it was pick a day. For us, it was Thursday. Every Thursday, you're going to run down the list of open invoices or open tickets, right, that hadn't been approved. You're going to send a summary statement to the customer, the person responsible for approving that. If they don't respond to you on the first email, you're going to pick up the phone and call them. If you don't get a response whenever you try to call them, you're going to escalate it, and then we're going to call the person above them. So part of it is you can't measure what you can't track, right? So you got to be doing electronics so you can track it. The other part of it is constant communication and good communication, right? You don't need to bug people, but good, expected, kind of scheduled communication with your customer will keep you informed, and it will let them know, hey, there's something to be done.
Awesome. This next one's a great question. So could you quantify the average improvement in DSO when someone actually implements a digital field ticket solution into their workflow? Is there like an average that you know of, Brandon?
Yeah, so we've done hundreds of these over the last several years. It varies greatly. There's a number of variables, right? How are you handling follow-ups for tickets and invoices prior to the electronic system? Who's your customer? Customers each have their own kind of average DSO and days to approve and that kind of thing. So I will say, just in general, on average, when we walked in the door to a supplier's company that did not have an electronic system, the average DSO would typically be between 75 and 100 plus days. Once we implemented a system like this and we were getting those tickets in and getting them submitted up electronically, that total DSO, now this is from start to finish, right, including the invoice, total DSO would typically come down to between 70 and 90, I would say. It was it's not magic, right? People say, oh man, I thought you said I was going to get paid tomorrow. Well, no, not exactly. What we're looking for is net improvement, right? And there was always a dramatic net improvement. The biggest area where we saw improvement, that's why I called it out on this webinar, is that invisible DSO. When we walked in the door, most people couldn't track it. Most people that are doing paper tickets, they say, well, I don't know how long it takes to get a ticket, from completed job and where we can start processing it. I think it's probably a day or two. Well, it turned out it was more like 7 or 8 days, right, on average, sometimes much longer. But that piece right there, I can guarantee you, we get that down to just within an hour. And the way we do that is with an electronic system. You put the entry of that ticket data in the hands of your field user with a mobile app. And when they put it in, and they hit submit, it shows up in the web immediately for you to start processing. So that part we're very clear on. The other parts are variable depending on the customer, but you can create huge improvement. We'll call it on average 7 to 8 days of invisible DSO.
That's quite a difference. Pretty impactful. Okay, if the company was to implement a digital ticketing solution, what would how would the onboarding play out today, given the work from home policies in place?
Yeah, so common thought process when implementing something like this is that you got to have a team of people come out and sit in your office for a week, right? You're going to eat up all your time. I hear that all the time. People say, oh, I don't have time to implement a field ticketing solution, or my guys are working, I can't bring them in to train. So it really doesn't work like that most of the time. We do usually a series of like 1 hour training sessions, kind of like we're doing right now, right? We'll do them remotely. We'll do them using some of these products we talked about today. We'll do webinar training. Most of the training is done with the personnel in your office that are responsible for reviewing and checking those tickets once they come in. And what you'll see is an offset between the time that they're not having to spend rekeying that information into an Excel sheet or into QuickBooks or into the electronic approval process. They will be spending that time, some of that time, attending these webinar trainings. Typically, we'll do 2 to 3 one-hour trainings with that user group, right? That's going to kind of manage the process. The process or the training associated with teaching someone how to enter a ticket on the mobile app is actually extremely simple. We've got some recorded videos. Videos last just a few minutes. We've got screenshots. We've got some how-to guides. Most people will just pass those around to their guys and say, look, here, this is how you enter the ticket. It's as easy as, pulling up any kind of web form on your phone, or just typing a text message with a series of fields. They're just entering the same data that they already write down on a piece of paper. So it's actually very simple, pretty straightforward, and it can all be done remotely. So the fact that we're being asked to, socially distance and not be right in the middle of your office, I think it's actually a good thing. It forces us to, use some of these tools, keeps costs down on both sides, right? And it shows just how straightforward the training can be.
And I guess as an added bonus, it's kind of nice when the guys are entering in their information on this mobile app that, maybe it's a little bit easier to read than handwritten notes on a ticket. That's probably an added bonus. All right, do we have any other questions? Do we have any other questions, guys? All right. Just want to give you a little bit of information. So if you would like to ask us more questions about, field ticketing or information about how different ways that you might be able to make your business more efficient during this time. Brandon's, as I said, he's an expert. So you can email us at businessdevelopment@drillinginfo.com and just send us your questions. Also, we do have a special offer for everybody who attended today. In order to assist you guys in trying to take advantage of maybe getting more efficient and maintaining your business continuity during this time, we are actually offering 15 months of access to our digital field ticket app. It's actually called Field Ticket, with any annual subscription to the application. So again, if you're interested in learning more about that, you can also email us at businessdevelopment@drillinginfo.com about that, and just let us know you're interested, and we can get somebody on the phone to answer your questions. And finally, you can actually learn more about this field ticketing app. If you just want to visit the website, the URL is right here, oildex.com/product/oilfield-services-suite. So if you want to just check it out, we also have that URL. You can go get some more information on it. Besides that, guys, thank you so much for joining us. And again, stay safe out there, and thank you for your continued hard work. And we're all in this together. So I hope that you found this content helpful, and have a great rest of your day. Thanks a bunch. Bye.